Everyone hates networking. You have like a hack that gets you beyond that quickly with someone. What is a door you closed behind you and weren't able to reopen and you regretted it?
And the only way forward is forward. It's not really something you can just undo. 90% of white collar jobs have been replaced with AI. There's not going to be the same consumer base that there used to be as well. Be interested more than trying to be interesting.
How has networking created your business?
It goes way back to the beginning. We've been in business 17 years now, and about 6 months in, we joined a chamber of commerce where we started to build a lot of good connections in the community. Was at Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, and we picked up a client here and a client there through referrals and interactions through people we met there. But over the years, we've continued to expand. We've tried a lot of different options. Obviously, networking's stayed the same and changed over the last decade and a half. But even out of those early days, we've picked up retainer clients that are retainers to this day. 16 years after they signed on, through building those personal relationships, seeing people on a regular basis, building connection, spending the time and energy to get to know people and their business and who they are, and not just the quick, interaction of, hey, who do you know? Send me some business cards. Here's my business card. It's really about that longer term relationship. And even to this day, we're still leveraging relationships we've made out of that first organization that we joined. Now, obviously, there's other aspects to it. We do our own events and try to get our network and our network's network to interact. And so we do every other month a networking happy hour where we build out an invite list from not just ourselves, but other people that we know, and try to get again everybody's network into a room and have those interpersonal interactions. And I think that's something that is a huge benefit. In today's day and age where everyone's getting bombarded with LinkedIn requests, and there's certainly an aspect of that that's valuable and should be part of your effort. But I think still having that in-person interaction is continuing to have a real impact on the business.
Do you think Gen Z and millennial are represented in these offline events much at all? And if so, why?
Yeah, millennial for sure. Gen Z, I would say, tends to be, and some of it's just where they are in the career cycle, tends to be the salespeople that are showing up to these things, because I think one, they're earlier in their career potentially. Also, I think you're in that role potentially bringing in the people that are a little bit more extroverted, a little bit more comfortable in that in person space, and then also I think just through the nature of that role, it kind of forces people into that space, whether they're kind of comfortable or not, going out and doing that. So I would say millennial for sure, especially as I think they've moved, up in the age bracket and the career seniority to be more, potentially their own entrepreneurs or business owners, or, people in more influential positions. I think we're seeing definitely that maybe more than we did 8 years ago, where it was, I think, similar, where the salespeople would show up, but we didn't see as much of the people that are a little bit further up in the organization.
How do you go deeper in building relationships with people? Because everyone hates networking and everyone hates small talk. So, do you have like a hack that gets you beyond that quickly with someone?
Yeah, it's the world's oldest hack, which is be interested more than trying to be interesting. And I think it's really about asking people about them, who they are, questions beyond just the who are you, what do you do. Obviously, it's a great place to start when you're in a room and you're meeting somebody for the first time, but trying to go beyond that. And then I think the follow up is really important. Hey, it's been great talking to you tonight. I'd love to, pick up this conversation. You want to grab a coffee, and, we can chat a little bit more about, your upcoming ski vacation. Plus, I'd love to, get a better sense of, how your, business is faring in 2026, and, those sort of things. So, I think going into that follow up is a big piece of it. And then trying to spend more time, trying to ask actual questions that are beyond just the who are you, what do you do, nice to meet you, all right, I'm going to go talk to the next person, here's my business card, and so I think that spending that actual time is good. And then also I think just again, something I think we found through our own events is that consistency of every couple of months we're getting together, you got your regulars, you got some new people every time, and then spending time with both the regulars and the new people and the people maybe you haven't seen in a couple of months, and trying to catch up with those folks, and what's going on, and hearing more about their family and their life and those things as you have met them now multiple times. And again, I think it's the world's oldest hack, but it's just spending time being interested in the other person, and then also that consistency. You're not going to build that relationship in a one and done conversation. So the people that you've got some sort of connection with, whether it's on a similar interest perspective or similar business perspective, spending the time and energy to follow up with those folks.
Quick break. I put together a free guide called Network Before You Need It. It's 6 lessons I learned that helped me create over $100 million in value for my network, generate over $15 million in revenue for my businesses, and fundraise over $8 million for my businesses and my clients. If you want to build relationships that work for you before you need them, go get this guide right now. The link is in the show notes. Okay, let's get back.
When you're at a networking event or you have an opportunity to meet with someone, how can you tell if they're interested to actually have that conversation with you? What sort of body language are you looking for, or something that you may notice that you think other people don't see?
Yeah, I mean, I think eye contact is a big part of it. Obviously, if you're having a conversation with somebody, and then in that space, you're seeing that they're engaged, and actually having that back and forth. If they're kind of looking around or looking past you, or looking down, that is generally an indication of, all right, cool, it's great meeting you. Let me get out of your way. But I think beyond that, there's just kind of the flow of the conversation. Are they asking questions back? Are they actually getting invested in the conversation? Are they asking follow up questions on what we were just talking about, or is it just the answer and okay, I guess we're done. There's no next step there. So looking for that, and I think that's something that um, maybe is a little bit of a challenge with certain personality types, and and some are regard maybe some generational differences too, where there may be less comfort in a environment where you're just meeting a bunch of strangers, and if your personality type is a little bit more introverted, then the signs might be a little bit more subtle, but ideally you're finding that actual genuine connection. If there's not, there isn't one, you don't force it, and that's kind of I think the better philosophy from a just general business perspective, right? Is that you watch for those signs of interest, and if there's not one there, you're not going to force your way through it. So just kind of be respectful of that. And all right, yeah, we just don't seem to have any any vibe here. Let's it was nice meeting you, and I'll go talk to somebody else. And I think it's just being being respectful of those boundaries, but also looking for those common points of connection that can, generate genuine interest in each other.
You had said that sometimes you look to be more interested in them than interesting for,
Mhm.
as yourself. When you're walking up to someone you don't know anything about, how, and there's no like floating card in front of them that gives you all of the information about them like you can have with a video call now.
Yeah,
How do you figure out what's the right thing to ask them so that they are continued to be interested in having that conversation with you?
sure. And it's that transition from small talk to an actual conversation that I think everyone can struggle with sometimes, especially if there's not a lot of back and forth. Um, I think in general, it's that looking for those opportunities. And I think yeah, you start with, oh, hey, nice to meet you. How'd you hear about the event? Great to see you. Have you been to one of these before? Those sort of just kind of just general icebreaker sort of, hey, I'm just kind of feeling out the conversation, and ideally something will come up from a follow up of oh, hey, let's say it's a Thursday event or something. Did you see that we're going to have snow this weekend? Do you ski? Just simple little things that, again, kind of small talky, but if you can kind of build it beyond just, hey, how about that weather, to some sort of, let's start up a conversation. And again, so it's not just, oh, I think it's going to snow this weekend. It's, oh, do you ski? It's Colorado. Here, that's obviously a topic of conversation. But and there's a decent chance that you're talking to somebody who does, and even if they don't, there may be something behind that. And so again, it's just, I think it's just spending that extra moment beyond just the that initial question, and then what's the meat of it, what's the follow up, and then ideally just listening for something else that gives you an entrance into another part of the conversation. Oh, you're new with your company. How's it going so far? Were you doing something similar before? Whatever sort of thing there, which again, now maybe you can start getting a better history of their background. Oh yeah, I'm with a new company because I moved from Ohio, and oh cool, tell me more about that. So there's just looking for those opportunities, and again, trying to keep the conversation. You get asked a question, you answer that question, you put it back on them, you ask them a question, and try to keep that flow. And usually within a minute or two, you have a good sense of, okay, I can spend another 10 minutes talking to this person, and it's going to be interesting and valuable. Or I'm trying to get blood out of a turnip and they're just not interested in conversation. That's cool. Nice to meet you. Hopefully we'll see you at the next one. So
What do you hate about networking?
um it's an interesting question. I think when you do kind of get that, if you're at a networking thing, especially an in-person one, they can get really exhausting if you kind of go one person after the other and you're just getting that one word response. They're not really asking questions back. I mean, it can be really exhausting. And if you feel like, okay, I've just spent an hour talking to people and I met nobody of any interest whatsoever, and whether it's from a hey, this would be somebody just go fun, have a, let's go have a beer sometime, or hey, actually, let's sit down and talk business. Like either way, you go through an hour of just no point of connection across multiple people. That can get a little bit tiring sometimes. And I think also, depending on the room you're in, um, you can end up in situations where maybe that group has more of a clicky vibe to it, and you kind of go into a space, and if people are not themselves kind of moving around and trying to talk to new people, and they just kind of plant, and you've got these four people have been talking all night, which is great, hopefully they're having a great time, but it makes it really hard if you're maybe new in the room, you don't know a lot of people, and you're just trying to strike up a conversation and say hi to somebody. That can be challenging too if you kind of go into a room that's really really established and you're the new guy. It can feel a little bit like you're interrupting somebody else to go up and talk to them, and so that can also be a little bit uncomfortable. um, but I think you do this long enough and you kind of just get used to it. But those are probably the two where you just feel like you're putting a lot of energy in and you're not kind of getting energy back out, and that can be challenging. And even if you leave the event and you haven't made a great business connection or something, hopefully you just met some interesting people. Maybe you got some anecdotes that you can drop in a future conversation because you heard something interesting about what's going on with this large company in the area, and maybe what they're doing in hiring or whatever it is. And that's actually a lot of value too, is just getting a better sense of what's happening in your business community. Beyond just, again, what's in it for me. There's a lot of information that can be learned from this. Oh, this company is changing leadership. Oh, that might be interesting. Maybe I need to do a little bit of research in that company and see what's going on over there. Those sort of things. And we've got a pretty dynamic business environment here. So there's companies moving their headquarters here, moving their headquarters out. There's people hiring. There's people laying off. And so knowing that type of information can be really, really interesting and valuable. Even if you didn't make a great business connection, maybe you pick something up that's going to be an interesting conversation piece with somebody else that now you can talk about their space and their industry, and that can really get somebody going. Once you get them excited about what they do, if you have something to kind of prime that with, oh, I heard this is going on in your industry. I'd love to hear more about it. How's that affecting you guys? So that can be really valuable too. So again, as long as some sort of energy is coming back out, I think it can be a valuable night. But it can be really frustrating when it's just kind of brick wall after brick wall. And you feel like, well, that was a good use of my time.
As you were saying all that, I was thinking about how We have AIs that come into a video call and summarizes the notes and sends it to both parties. And I was thinking, how cool would it be if there was an AI, sitting as a fly on a wall in a networking event and was able to categorize and summarize all of the conversations that all of the people had and all of the permutations, and then send all of the information as like a report to everybody so that everybody could hear what everyone else talked about, even if they weren't part of the conversation, so that then they could go and use that information as they need.
Yeah. How do you think people would respond to that if their individual conversation was now shared, broader? I'm kind of curious, your thoughts on that. Because, yeah, certainly, I think there's some value there from a information gathering perspective. But does that again preclude the actual connection with a human if you say, "Oh, I noticed in the notes when you were talking to this other person, and I never met you that night, that your dog is sick. I hope your dog's okay." I'm just, those are the things that I'd worry about in making a less personal, space, and I think that can definitely be a potential pitfall sometimes. And you start to wonder about, you see the things about like meta glasses now, right? People are wearing those out in public, and then there's the controversy around what's being not only shared by them, but what's going back to Meta for information gathering. That because it's always recording whether you are sending it to Meta or not. Meta's getting that information. That's something that I think people are struggling with and grappling with, and in some cases, the convenience of it may overpower the concerns about it. But um, I think we're still in an early stage when it comes to that, and what people's comfort level is going to be with potentially one-on-one conversations becoming group conversations without even thinking about it.
What I would say is everyone's already giving all of this information to all of the companies anyways, just by using their applications for free.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's definitely that, and that's something that certainly from a marketing perspective, I've argued with, or argued for and against as well, is that yes, they know on aggregate a lot about you, and we can serve ads to you that are very very specific and tailored, um, but is that better or worse? I might argue that it's better that I'm actually getting ads that might be of interest to me, and I'm learning about things that are of interest to me, as opposed to I'm getting ads that have absolutely no bearing on my life. Um, but we've seen how people reacted to that, 10, 15 years ago, and the increase in privacy lockdowns on browsers and cookies and those sort of things, and that's had some major effect on the marketing sphere. But people had a backlash to it. I don't know if that's we're past that point where people are less concerned about it. But it's one of those things where, yes, you're sharing all this information on apps, but you are, um, by default, kind of expecting a level of interpersonal privacy when you're having a conversation with just another person, that it doesn't necessarily go to everybody else that you actually can see in that room. But again, I'm not saying that's necessarily the right take, but I definitely think it's something that we're going to be dealing with over the next few years, especially as more smart devices come into those rooms. And I mentioned Meta glasses, but they're relatively obvious now, but they're going to be less so as time goes on. And are we going to get past the point of something on your face, and now it's just a lapel pin or something that you just walk in a room and it's recording everybody and everything, and your smart watches and those sort of things. I mean, it's there. It's just, are people going to tolerate it? I'm not sure.
With the company that you have and networking,
Mhm.
how do you pitch yourself to people when you're networking, knowing that a lot of companies are capable of using AI to serve their own needs for advertising these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have that conversation all the time, and our response at this stage, and AI is continuing to evolve, and it's getting better. It is getting to be a larger and larger piece of the puzzle. Right now, we make the argument for AI makes us better at our job. It makes us more efficient on research. It makes us more efficient on analytics and data processing. Um, it is not great at being creative. It's not great at being um, creating valuable content. I think it can summarize things really, really well. But I think there's a side to having um, human creativity go into it. And it may be that this, is for a transitional period and you give it a couple more years and now it's, just as creative as an actual human, with less mistakes and less hallucinations and less just flat out made up stuff. But AI still struggles with some really basic things that a human doesn't. And so for now, I think there's this space in between. Um, as it continues to evolve, maybe it will become a thing where there's a bespoke nature to it, and there's a certain portion of the population that still wants hand churned butter, and so there's still a percent of the population that wants an actual human doing their marketing, or it may move into a situation where you've got a dozen AI agents replacing your marketing department, and they're able to do it at a level of capacity. I think there's a lot of existential questions here in the next 10 years, and one of those is going to be who are we marketing to when 90% of white collar jobs have been replaced with AI. There's not going to be the same consumer base that there used to be as well. So I think there's going to be some really interesting conversations over the next 10 years. And I think, there are some clear use cases that we're heading in the direction of. I think there are other ones that are going to be interesting too, to see if, you know, um, I follow technology quite a bit, and there's some arguments being made that the current LLM model of AI is going to hit a ceiling here pretty soon, and there's just a certain point at which it can no longer advance, and they're going to have to find a new model, um, beyond that, and it will be interesting to see if that turns out to be the case or not, and there's a limit on it, and this is as far as the current version can go, and something else has to come along. Um, but again, it's going to be very interesting, 5 to 10 years.
What I have seen is people focusing on what's called uh, world models,
Hmm.
where instead of focusing on learning language and based on language learning how to do tasks, giving it eyes and basically tying AI to robotics so that it can learn about the world through experience like humans do,
Hmm.
because language is one aspect of how we learn, and obviously the other senses are really important. So there was a guy who left, I think it was Meta. Yeah, I think it's Yann LeCun, the French scientist. He started his own company to focus on world models, and I think he raised $1 billion seed round.
Yeah, yeah.
So I believe the future is this world model type system, but it's not really well known yet, and there's not really any use cases that are publicly known.
Yeah, I mean, I think the earlier stages of that would be like your self-driving cars and things like that, right? Where they're being put into the world, they're attached to a machine, they've got sensors, they're out there interacting at scale. Obviously, you've got your laboratory versions of this, but and that is something that continues to evolve and is getting progressively, intermittently better. And we're to the point now where there are some self-driving cars out on the road, and it's gotten there. It's taken a long time, a lot of energy, but it's going to accelerate. I do think that's absolutely. I think an interesting next step here. I think one of the challenges will be what's the scale look like? Are we at the point where we can um, uh, cost effectively create these real world devices that are moving around and interacting with the world in a way that can add value at scale? Because again, this it's right now you can just throw everything in a data center and have it process, and you can do it at scale. Can you do that at a cost effective scale? But you mentioned the seed rounds, and there's a lot of money floating around in it. It'll be I think again very telling in the next 5 to 10 years, which are the companies that kind of make it through and find that next step and find that differentiation, and which are the ones that don't make it. There's a lot of space there. I think we can look at it from just a purely functional perspective. And I think there's also a societal level, conversation to have. And again, I don't know if we're um, ready to have it in the time we've got allotted to have it before we've crossed certain thresholds on it. But when there are no incentives to having a human interaction beyond what you can do in front of a screen, now you've got even less human interaction because you've got uh, chatbots and AI agents doing the interaction and the labor, and you go online and it's just one bot talking to another, and you've got your um, shopping options, and that's all happening in a closed environment. And is ChatGPT recommending that product because it's someone's paying it to recommend that product? Because there's got to be there's going to be an ad model here very very soon. They're already testing it out. Um, I think there's going to be just another layer of what does this do at a societal level, and then again, who are the consumers once there are machines doing 90% of the jobs that we currently have, and there will certainly be new jobs that come out of this, but are they going to be at scale that sustain the number of people that are going to be looking for them? So I think there's a philosophical side to it that I think we need to be having that conversation. I think it's being probably limited in a lot of ways beyond the scale that we should be having the conversation, because right now it's a convenience and sometimes a novelty, and it will be what comes next, though, that again, next 5 to 10 years we're going to have some pretty significant shifts.
What do you think comes next?
um I mean, there's the dystopian version, and then I think there's the delayed version. I don't know that there's a utopian version out of this, but I think the dystopian one is, we lose hundreds of millions of jobs in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's going to have an obvious effect on, society, economies, day to day life, and how we react to that, and how we, go forward from that is going to have, I think, be very, very telling. I think there's the version where we find a little bit of an equilibrium here because we hit a limit of what the current systems and models are capable of, and maybe delays for another 10 years because new systems have to be developed and trained, and whatever, something that goes beyond the limitations of the current models. um, and then there's maybe a version of this, and that's the utopian one, which I don't know that we're having that conversation to head in that direction, but maybe it is. It's, hey, we don't have to do work in order to sustain ourselves anymore. So it doesn't matter if there are any jobs, but that's a societal shift at a scale I don't think we've ever seen. So um, it will be very, very interesting to see what happens because, yes, every new technology brings with it new opportunity. Um, but this one, I believe, is going to be so significant that the volume of new work that comes out of this new technology, I don't think is going to be there to replace the work that it dissipates.
What's the most painful problem you're trying to solve right now?
Um, yeah, I think it's a lot of the same problems that business owners have dealt with for generations. I think it's just in a slightly different spin. It's, what do we do as far as what is a sustainable business model now? What is a sustainable business model in 3 years and then 5 years? And what does that look like from what we're doing from a staffing perspective, what we're doing from a infrastructure investment perspective, what does this look like from a experimenting with newer and more untested approaches, and where can we find in the short term optimization that creates opportunity and value, and then it's in the midterm, it's how do we shift to deliver things that people are not getting out of AI. And then down the road, it's what does this look like when we have major economic shifts and societal shifts that none of us are really quite sure how fast or what shape they're going to take. So,
Let me rephrase that. What's currently the most painful problem that you're trying to solve? An immediate problem.
I think right now the most immediate problem I'm trying to solve is being kind of a smaller to mid-sized company. We're 20-ish people. Is that there are still jobs that are mine as the founder, as the owner, as the the principal, that in a larger company would not be mine, but at this size company are. And what are the best ways to replace me in those kind of fractional jobs? And that is something that I'm anyway experimenting with, trying to figure out, are there ways for AI to take some of this stuff that is a fractional role that is not necessarily the best use of my time, but makes no sense to hand off to anybody at the scale we are. Um, I think that's something that a lot of business owners are have been dealing with forever, and I think now there's some different ways to approach that. Is it bringing in fractional help? Is it bringing in um, new tools? Is it training AI agents to take that on? Or are those certain things just kind of part and parcel of running a business of this size? And that's probably the thing that uh, I think creates the most opportunity for us. I also think it's the thing that potentially creates the most limitation for us. And so it's how do you scale, um, especially when you're not sure that scaling is the answer in the next 3 years. So.
How do you assess each of those pieces in order to come to a decision about what's the right thing to do right now?
Research, blue skying, whiteboarding, all the things that are like, okay, these are, these, basically it's the, I don't know if you're familiar with EOS, but they've got a problem solving system called IDS, which is identify, define, and solve. And it's basically that is, all right, let's really define what this problem, or identify what this problem is. Let's really figure out all the intricacies of it. What are the challenges? What are the pros? What are the cons? How do we further define that into, okay, practically, what is the effect this is having? What's the outcome that we're looking for? All of that. And then it's, all right, how do we solve this? And so some of that can be done with, just good old fashioned, what are other people doing? And some of that really needs, bigger group discussion, within our leadership team. And some of that is just kind of looking at, all right, I'm spending an inordinate amount of time on this week. What does that mean for next week and the future weeks? And, so again, I think it's that process is something that we've taken to heart. And, each one has its own outcome, but that's the process that we generally go through.
How long does it typically take for you to be able to come to a conclusion? Because I know businesses are pushed or founders are pushed to move fast,
Mhm.
but what's the reality?
Yeah, I mean, it's both, right? You want to be measured, you want to be, you want to be, educated, you want to make the right decisions, you want to have the plan. But you can sit there and navel gaze forever, and keep complaining about the issue and keep trying to think it through. And at some point, you have to pull the trigger and actually get it done. There's also the bandwidth issue of what is the bandwidth that goes into solving this problem, and when does that become available? And so sometimes it's, yes, I can make a decision and act on it right now, and so there are other times where it's, yes, I can make a decision, I can act on it next quarter, and it just kind of depends on what the issue is, and what the bandwidth available is. But I, I try to I try to really process through everything in as much detail as I can. um, think it through, kind of come up with a solution. I like to bounce it off of certain people within the organization that may have some insight in it. Am I missing anything? Is one of my biggest questions when I explain this is where we're headed. This is what I'm thinking about doing. What am I? What are my blind spots? Um, and then it's once the decision's made, it's all right. We're riding this through, and um, in an ideal world, it was the right decision. Everything works out, and if it wasn't, you give it a proper go, and then you go back to the IDS and say, okay, we have a new problem. Is it just to undo what we did, or is it tweaking it, or is it we need a different solution, or whatever it is? But yeah, going back to that process.
I've heard Jeff Bezos say that there's some doors that are one way and some doors that are two way.
Mhm. Yeah.
where there's some decisions you can make that you can undo, and there's some decisions you can't.
Yes. Yeah.
What is a door you closed behind you and weren't able to reopen and you regretted it in your business?
So we've done a handful of acquisitions over the last 6 years. We've done three different ones. Two were relatively small. It's still a lot of work when you're merging two systems and two teams and technology sets and all the things that go into that, and integrating the clients into workflow. There's still a lot of energy and effort that went into it. And then there was a third one that we did, where it was a little bit larger, a little more complex, came with larger expenses. And that one is one that, I think has worked out, uh, will work out better in the future. Did not work out nearly as well as the other two. And in hindsight, this one, is taking way more work than it probably should have. And, there was probably some mistakes I made there. And that was one of those ones where you move forward, you go down the road, you pull the trigger, and now you just have this thing. And the only way forward is forward. It's not really something you can just undo. Um, because here it is. It is now part of your organization, and you gotta figure out how it fits. And I think that's where, you kind of you obviously you learn from that. You find out, okay, what are the things I missed? How do I do it better next time? But you also look for those opportunities to say, okay, these are the things that are fixable and we can move forward on. These are the things that are not and need to just go away. And so you maybe, shut down part of that organization or what have you. And you just look at, um, what do you have control over, and how do you build a roadmap forward? And again, same sort of thing. What's the real issue, and what's the solution we're going to implement, and you just move forward.
What's the most important thing you've learned in life so far?
It's a very big question. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a super unique thing, but it's something that I think people learn at different stages in their life, and I think it takes a lot of different twists and turns sometimes to get there. But and I think fundamentally you always know it's there, but it's how do you prioritize it? But really finding that balance between running a business, and these are all the things I have to do to keep that going. And I've got staff that relies on me, I have clients that rely on me, my family relies on this business. There's a lot of things relying on that. But then also being able to step back and actually spend the time and energy with your family, and finding that balance between the two. And I think sometimes everyone talks about work life balance, but sometimes as a business owner that's not always an option. um, but there is a point where you have to kind of force some of that back in there, because no matter how many people are relying on you to keep that business going, because you have that momentum, you have those responsibilities, you have those commitments. Finding that, okay, no, but this is separate, this is something that is also needs to be a priority. And yeah, I mean, I think it's something that everybody you know, has to figure out for themselves a little bit of where that balance is, and what are the dueling responsibilities and push and pull, but making sure that you've got your space for other aspects of your life.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this insight, I've handpicked another video for you right here on the screen. For more actionable strategies that get you real results, hit subscribe.